I was like, look, this is what people are talking about in Connecticut, and it's housing and segregation and what it has to do with zoning. So we're just going to read through this quick article because I really think it gets to the heart of so many of the talking points that we hear in the national narrative, right? Even though this is specifically about Connecticut, these are the same talking points that you're going to hear nationally. So starts off by saying the state deserves credit for the release of the Connecticut Housing and Segregation Study. There's one thing government's good at, it is doing studies.
Yep.
Hey, it's better than them doing something else, right? I'd rather them do a study and not do the thing. But all right, so they made it public in January. It was a deep dive into the residential housing patterns that reveals historic discrimination that has persisted to the present day and continues to shape our cities and towns. And it says we're among the most segregated states in the union, and this is a common point I know from New York City, because you always hear in New York City is the most segregated city, right? And I was like, I thought that's why we love New York City. You go to Chinatown, you go to Little Italy, you go to Koreatown. It's like
Probably
anyway.
depends on how you define it.
Right. Yeah. So they're going to get into some of these things. And it's true, historically, redlining was a real thing. The governor must know our highly segregated communities are the direct result of 20th century federal policies that financed white-only suburbs, redlined black neighborhoods, and built the transportation infrastructure that paved over integrated communities and hollowed out America's downtowns. Building on this foundation, our state facilitated many okay, I want to leave that because this is I feel like this is a secondary point. I want to know what you feel about this sentence. Like, do you feel I feel like this is the premise of a lot of like systemic racism arguments. What is your take on how valid this premise is?
It is, I would say, half true, and most of it just revolves around like time frame. And so, yes, federally, they did get much more institutionalized in all of these concerns that they're talking about: suburbs, redlining, building transportation infrastructure. Like the 1950s, the Eisenhower administration approved the like Highways Act, and it essentially went through every major U.S. city. I'm not even kidding, every U.S. city, and it decided where are the slums, and guess where the slums are? The quote slums, right? That's where all the poor people or the immigrants or the minorities live. And they gutted it. They say, you have to move, get out of here. And they built highways over it. Because, of
Right.
course, government controls the roads. But yeah, all of these are true. There's a lot of more localized policies before that. But yeah,
Yeah,
from
I
a federal
remember
standpoint, yep.
on Twitter, I saw this thread recently that showed that. How it showed how it's like, this is what a beautiful city looks like in America. So quaint and lovely and whatever, And then it's like, this is what it looks like now. And it's just like everything's hollowed out. A huge road is through it. Like, oh, nice. Okay, so right, there's certainly validity to this. And now this is the part where I wonder how much of this is true. Building on this foundation, our state facilitated many decades of exclusionary zoning, allowing suburban communities and their school districts to accumulate wealth and exclude low and moderate income families. And what we're going to find out what they mean by exclusionary zoning is single family zoning. Our choices today are built on that legacy of government-sponsored segregation, exclusion, and racist divestment of Black and brown communities, and most government policies today continue to perpetuate that separation. I would make a very similar argument to this, except my conclusion would be, so the government should stop doing any state-sponsored things, right? Whereas this person's argument is like, well, the government just needs to do different things, because if they do different things, then they won't end up doing this, right?
Yes, this is most of like the YIMBY type talk. The yes in my backyard, which is the opposite of no in my backyard.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yes, in
so
my backyard? I've never
yeah,
heard this.
you've never heard
Yimbys?
YIMBY? Yeah,
No, I've heard of
there's
NIMBYs.
yeah, there's YIMBYs all over the country now, which is both good and bad. But instead of occasionally they'll talk about restrictions and loosening them, but most of the time they just want subsidized housing. So it's a
Okay.
mix. It's a mixed bag.
Um, so yeah, it's basically saying here, residents, they want to move out of Hartford, which is like one of the poorest cities in Connecticut, if not, I think it's after Bridgeport and New Haven, actually. So Hartford, it's a pretty poor city in Connecticut. They're saying, most of these people want to move out, or 65% of the people surveyed said that they wanted to move out, but they can't afford to, they can't find a place they can afford in the suburbs. So they're saying down here, many suburbs shun new housing, particularly multifamily developments that could be affordable for many people who live in cities. Strict zoning codes bring exclusionary results with effect of segregating Connecticut by race and income levels. So
Yep.
this is, and so you agree with that?
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. They prevent new building of housing, including multifamily. They have height restrictions. They have percent sizability within, like, let's say you have to have a quarter acre lot, and every quarter acre, only 20% of it can be housing. They prevent, building multiple, like side housing, or like a step parent or maybe a friend type shack in the back that's smaller. They prevent adding height, so they have height restrictions. They have all of these problems. Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right, that you agree with, like, the way that this person indicts the problem. And I think that a lot of conservatives, right, conservatives or even people who aren't conservatives, because I found that in Connecticut, this isn't really like a Democrat Republican issue. Like, there's certain people who are like, I guess, like on the far left, but, like, just regular people, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, I mean, Connecticut's highly Democrat, they, they live in their houses, they've lived there a long time, and they have property value based on these things, and they don't have the expectation that down the street or across the street or next door, all of a sudden is gonna go up a huge apartment building, right? A multi-family building or some low income, subsidized housing thing.
Or
Um,
having multi-use. Yep. Like in
yes.
large cities and many European type cities before zoning was official, they have multi-use, and they have like quaint little, might call it cute or pretty little cities where you have like a shop on the bottom and maybe some housing on the top, and maybe above that you have some energy production or water facility. Yeah, there's multi-use.
Right. So, but just people, I guess, yeah, they don't want that, right? They want their neighborhood, like their single family neighborhood. And I don't know, I see that too, especially if we're working in an imperfect environment, right? Like, it's not like this is the hard thing about being a libertarian or thinking from the libertarian perspective is like, well, we don't live in a libertarian society, right? So you're not choosing between like a perfect libertarian world and whatever choice is being presented. You're choosing between like one statist existence and another statist existence. And and so it's like I feel like the current statist existence is better than like some enforced high density statist, experience.
Come on.